Good to see you, Nathan. Hi, Yitzchak. We're continuing our series on relationships, and I was speaking with one of the other members of the class. We were talking about some dating, and I remembered something I learned when I was studying mediation. I studied a little bit of mediation. It's called ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. And it's a little bit sad when you want to talk about relationships and you bring up disputes. But do you know that movie, The Matrix? I think it was in number 3, where he, I don't watch a lot of movies, but Matrix I liked, so I saw 1, 2, and 3. But in the third one, the hero, what's his name?
Neo.
You're a fan too, I see. He has to go see the Oracle, whatever that means, and he has to get by. The Oracle has a guard, and the guard has to check him out.
I think it's the second.
Is it the second one?
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, you also just happened to watch by a neighbor, right?
We can have a watch party for the Matrix later to figure out which one it is.
Purim's coming. In any case, and he says to him, basically he doesn't let him by until they fight. They have to fight. And at the end he says, you don't really know somebody until you fight with them. And as a matter of fact, there's a rabbi who was blessed memory. It was just his 9th yortzeit. He was the rabbi of the town I live in Tekoa, Rav Menachem, and he when he had many students, they would come and present their fiancés or their spouses, their potentials, girlfriends, to him. They wanted his approval. They wanted him to get his advice, and to share that they were a student of this rabbi, and he wanted him to meet her. And one of the things he would ask them is, have you fought yet? And if they hadn't, he said, you're not ready to get engaged. You have to fight first. Why is fighting is part of many relationships. I would say most relationships. Even you can imagine, between your parents. Do you ever fight with your parents? Do you ever fight with your siblings? Do you ever fight with your friends? Never fought. Yeah, we know your brother. But, and the question is not if you're going to fight, but the question really is how to fight. Fighting is just part of getting along with somebody that's other than you. You're always going to have different opinions. You're always going to have issues that you think one way, the other person the other ways. If it comes to invading with tanks and bombing with missiles, you're not doing it right. That's not the right way to resolve the issues, both on an international level and, of course, not in an interpersonal relationship. So how do you resolve fights? So many times, chas v'chalila should come to violence. That's really not allowed by the Torah. Don't listen to anybody who says you're allowed to beat your wife. You're not allowed to, and it's actually grounds for divorce. And
kids.
Somebody like you, that's no. So the truth is, I will answer the question. It actually, there's a pasuk in Kohelet, if I'm not mistaken. It says, Chosech shivto sonei b'no. Good morning. What that means in Hebrew, or in English, is that if you withhold the staff and you don't hit your kid, it's a sign that you hate him. That's it. It sounds like you must hit your child. It's either Mishlei or Kohelet. I'm not sure. You can look it up. It's in Mishlei. Mishlei. Thank you. I'm not sure which one. Proverbs, right? Proverbs. And from here, people, and of course, this is discussed in the words of our sages as well. It's not only from the biblical books. And the idea is, of course, that you have to discipline your children. Discipline, that's part of your job as a parent, to educate them. And education, it was pretty much standard in perhaps more in the ancient world and less so, we're going to come to nowadays soon, but part of discipline, pretty standard in some cultures until today, is that if the child does something wrong, you give him a slap, and of course it could get worse than that, and that's not condoned by anybody, even not by the pasuk in Mishlei. He didn't mean to beat the kid to a pulp, but to show him the proper way by reward and punishment. The concept of hopefully there's rewards there too, but punishment is sometimes part of it, that you have to show him we don't do that, and you physical punishment pretty much is part of human civilization from time immemorial. Now, a couple of 100 years ago, I think it was Rabbi Eliezer Papo, the author of the Pele Yoetz, but I might be mistaking him. It might be Rav Yaakov Kuli, the author of Me'am Lo'ez. He wrote a tshuva that says, in our day, this is already 300 years ago, in our day, he says, anybody who hits their children uses physical punishment to discipline them, even though they mean well, they're committing a grave violation. What violation? He says, there's a pasuk in the Torah, it says, do not place a stumbling block before the blind. What does that mean? Do not place a stumbling block before the blind. Obviously, this blind person can't see where he's going. You put a block there, he's going to fall. Don't cause him to fall. But the way it's understood by our sages from time immemorial is that this is a metaphor for causing someone else to sin. You're causing someone else to fall, that's prohibited from the Torah. So he says, by hitting your child nowadays, again 300 years ago already, he says, you're doing a grave violation of this prohibition, because in our day and age, he says, human psychology has changed. Kids nowadays, if you hit them, what are they going to do?
Hit back.
They'll hit back, and that is a biblical violation. It says you're not allowed to hit your parents. That's a biblical violation.
They hit back?
They could. You might be causing them to, if it's not to say it used to be and still is in some cultures, but the assumption of the verses in Kohelet, Mishlei, was that the child is expecting and accepting of this disciplinarian beating, and if it's not going to be accepted, it's not going to be taken as such, and it will essentially, beyond causing the child to beat you and violate the transgression of beating your parents or causing a wound on your parents, also it'll cause him to just go further and further away from the educational goals and ideals that you're trying to direct him to, because he's going to associate what you're trying to teach him, let's say Torah and the Torah ways and halacha. He says, don't do this, and you beat him in order to keep Shabbat. He's going to associate Shabbat with beatings, and he's just going to run away. And whenever he becomes free of your purvey, whatever age it is that he manages to get away, he's just going to leave it all. And so you're setting yourself up for failure if you use. And the Torah never says anywhere that you must beat your children. The point is to educate them. And of course, in the ancient world, this was a common, and still is in some societies, it's a common method for education. But it's really, for a couple hundred years now, it's disapproved of. I think nowadays it's illegal in many countries.
White countries like Scandinavia?
I don't know which ones in particular, but it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense that, if the psychology has changed, the goal is what's important. The goal is to be a good educator and to discipline your children. Sometimes the less you say is better. If you play things right. Rabbi Twersky writes. He's you might have heard of him. Rabbi Professor Twersky is a psychologist. He was also of blessed memory. He was also a Hasidic Rebbe of sorts, and the son of a Hasidic Rebbe, and so he describes a few of educational encounters he had with his father. And his father, I think he found out that he was a chess genius. He was a genius in general. So he was a chess genius when he was a young kid. He was, 10, I don't know, and he had someone, a guest came over for Shabbat, whatever, or Yom Tov, and he played chess with him. the guest was very interested and excited. Oh, it's chess genius, and they played with him. And there's nothing wrong with playing chess. As a matter of fact, it's quite a pastime of many rabbis to play chess on Shabbat. It's, what do they call it? The king's sport? Chess is well, just the sport in general it's a very well-known sport of intellectuals, and Jews, they use their brain and they try to develop it, and naturally they were drawn to play chess. But of course, and there's nothing wrong with playing chess on Shabbat. There's nothing muktzah about it. But is that the ideal way you should be spending your Shabbat? Is that you should be using the Shabbat to study Torah? What did we say? 6 hours a day, right? In any case, so his father found out that he played chess with this man, and he called him into his room, and he said to him, what did you do with so and so? And so, he realized what was going on, and he was being chastised without even saying anything. He said, he said, yeah, I played chess, and I'm misquoting the story, but I think basically he just sort of like turned up his nose, sort of like indicated that he wasn't so happy with him because he should have been learning Torah or something like that. And so he turned away to go, and with his hand on the door, his father says, "Hang on one second. Did you win?" He asked him if he won. So that is a very mild, beautiful story about a gentle chastisement. If he would have taken his belt off and whipped him, I don't know if he would have turned into Rabbi Professor Twersky that we know and love and written 80 books, right? So there's a tremendous wisdom to education. And so, this issue of hitting people. But let's go back to our topic of disputes and fighting. And clearly, violence for when you're angry at someone, so you're not supposed to be violent, and it's illegal as well in many circumstances. So there's something called alternative dispute resolution. Because, how do you resolve problems? How do you, when you have a negotiation with somebody, if you don't want to come to blows, right? The cavemen, with their clubs in those togas, right? Imagine the Flintstones. I don't know if you guys saw that show, but whatever, Oh, I want to go that way. Oh, I don't let you. So he beats him on the head. So he hits him with the club, and he hits him, and whoever's stronger wins. There's a pasuk. There's a phrase in the Talmud. Many times it's understood literally, but mostly most commentators understand it as a figurative. It says, "Kol da'alim gavar." Whoever's stronger wins. Is that the way we want life to work? That whoever's stronger wins? Yes, sir.
So on that, doesn't the Torah allow you to, basically beat someone up, but you just have to pay the monetary damages and the healthcare damages?
No. Most people assume it's a prohibition to this not. This is not on.
Like if you're angry with your friend, you have a big argument, and you get in a fight and you beat him up.
Yeah, no, it's not allowed. It's clearly most commentaries understand. When you learn about the Kama, at the beginning of the tractate, which talks about damages, the question is, the Torah is full of. You didn't see that. So what? We'll take care of it later. The Torah is full of, what happens if you cause damage, you have to pay for it, and how much damages, and so forth. But it never says anywhere explicitly, don't cause damage. So you could reach the conclusion that you proposed that, you can hit somebody and break his nose as long as you pay for the medical care. There's no prohibition. But most commentaries search and try to find for a source for what seems obvious to us, and it was obvious to them as well that you're not allowed to cause damage to property or to person, even if you're going to pay compensation later. That's not allowed. Many people say it stems from the mitzvah v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your neighbor as yourself. Would you want someone to smash up your car and then hand you a check for what it costs? No, you'd rather just not get damaged in the first place, right? So then don't do it to your friend. Other people say it's from another mitzvah, hashavat aveidah, that you have to return a lost object. Anyways, whatever the source is, it's quite clear you're not allowed to cause damage, neither to person nor to property. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Great. There's another chair here. There's another chair here if somebody needs. Let's just move the books off. It's fine. Come on, Nisim. Moshe, can you fill me up with any tea bag, please? Thanks. Yeah, I need a tea bag. Yeah. Okay. So let's continue.
Going back to relationships. Say you're in a relationship with someone that it's very difficult to argue with, like, because they do take it personally, even if they try to present it in a soft way. You know, is it better to just stay quiet, or is it better to find some sort of medium or something?
Okay, so
how do you?
It's very good. Thank you. That's good. Thanks. Thank you so much. So it's a good question. There's always arguments or fights or different wills because we are different people, and that's part of the way God created the world. What does it say in the Talmud? That just like their faces are different, right? Your phone now has facial recognition. So too their opinions are different. Everybody's got their own opinion, their own way of thinking. And so when you try to do something together, when you try to create a relationship, you're going to have disputes, you're going to have fights. And if you don't want to come to blows, because it's prohibited, and it's not necessarily the best way, it's destructive to both of you, it might even cause you, if you start to fight, you might even start to hate the person, which is the opposite of what you want to be doing. You're supposed to love each other. So how do you resolve conflicts? So, there's conflicts on the personal level, and as I mentioned, there's conflicts on the international level. I think they could use some lessons, Putin and Zelensky and the European Union and everybody around them. They could definitely use some lessons on how to resolve this dispute in a better way than invading the neighboring country and bombing them. Bezrat Hashem, they will. But we're going to talk about the personal level between you and ultimately between you and your spouse. Hopefully, the ideal is to create a loving relationship. Also between you and your parents. What I'm about to teach you, Bezrat Hashem, if we ever get to it, in the coming minutes, is a little tool, a technique, which I learned in a course. It's very, very basic to resolving conflicts in relationships. I think it's applicable in every context, both from the personal to the communal to the international. Yeah, go ahead.
You said that hitting somebody is prohibited?
Absolutely.
Bring a pasuk or
I just did. I brought two psukim. I said, Ahavta l'reacha kamocha, or hashavat aveidah.
Or to love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
You can love and hate somebody at the same time.
It's a family.
That's complicated. Yeah, it could be, but it could be, but.
What?
Yeah, that was a side point in answer to the question. It wasn't the central theme. But discussing damages and hitting people, that was also a side point. Answering Ariel's question about hitting children was what you particularly asked. Now, we'll talk about that another time. Parenting is quite difficult, quite and can be challenging, right? And using violence is really, really tricky. And as I said, frowned upon in the last few hundred years, more so than ever in history. But that's a longer discussion. The topic I wanted to raise was this idea of how to resolve conflicts. So what I'd like to introduce to you is the two terms which are needs and positions. In Hebrew, tzrachim and emdot. And usually, when people are fighting or arguing about a certain issue, they get stuck, they reach an impasse, which cannot be bridged if they're speaking about positions. I'll use a simple example of a salary negotiation between an employer and an employee. And the employee says, I want a raise. And the employer says, I can't give you a raise. Okay, well then, that's the end. That's the end of the negotiation. There's not much room to play, or the employee says, I need to make $10,000, or I can't justify working here. And the employer says, well, I can't pay more than $8,000 because it just doesn't fit my budget. And so, okay, so that's it. It's not the right job for this person, and for this employer, it's not right for this employee. If that's all you're going to talk about, the positions are clear. That's the end of the story. He has to leave the job, and there's no way around it. He can't pay more than 8, and he can't work for less than 10. So then there's no way around it. And don't say, of course, you're all thinking, I'm gonna make it easy for you. 9 is not an option, right? 9 is too much for the employer to pay, and it's not enough for the employee to receive. So just saying, oh, we'll meet in the middle, compromise, that's not, it's not possible, A, based on the given facts that we mentioned, and B, even if it were possible, probably both parties would be unhappy. Right? Both parties would be forcing themselves to, compromise is not always the best solution, right? You're saying, just compromise and, okay, do 9, and you'll work a little harder, or the person who wanted 10, he won't be happy. And the person who wanted to pay 9, he won't be happy because it's beyond his budget. And so that's not an option just to say, change the positions. The positions are given, they're ironclad. How can you resolve this dispute? I'm sure you're thinking in your mind, okay, go get another job. And that may be the end result, but I think there's maybe, the trick is to move away from this form of discussion, the discussion that's centered around the positions. The position is, I can't work for less than 10, I can't pay more than 8. What did you want to say, Yaakov? You wanted to say?
I would say that if the employer feels that the employee is worth it, I'll make sure that he can pay 10. Always.
I hear. But, you're assuming that the employer can pay the money, he just doesn't want to. But sometimes, you have a business and you have a bank account, you only have that amount a month, and if it's all, you don't have what to pay for them. Sometimes you can't pay more than 8. And that's legitimate, of course. Everybody has to have their budget. Even if you wanted to, I really like you, I want you, you're a good worker, but I don't want to go bankrupt, and I don't want to, I can't pay you what I don't have. So sometimes the positions are just ironclad. So what's the way out of it? Anybody?
What's the term of this type again?
This was an emda. An emda is a position. Ayin mem dalid hey. Emda, position. The positions are really, that's what creates the impasse. It's sort of like there's a cake. There's a cake.
For the employee one.
Okay.
So if it was something else, like a choice between who wants what sweets, for example, there's only so many in the cookie jar.
Mm-hmm.
You can reach compromises. One will take the loss, one will take the gain.
Yeah, sure. We're talking about something which is not a big deal. If you have the candy, you don't have the candy, it's not the end of the world. But for when you're a young child, though, you can apply these, and you should be applying these principles even for a young child. For him, that candy, he doesn't know what $1 million means. He knows what the candy is, and that's what he wants. For him, that's his entire world. He'll cry for hours if he doesn't get the candy. Right? So you can't make light of candy. For me and you, hopefully, we'll make light of candy.
It's easier to give alternatives.
Now you're talking, Moshe. Yeah.
Talking about having to reach an agreement with your employer is a very common thing for Jews living in Chutz La'aretz. not necessarily with pay, but when it comes to Shabbat and Chagim, because it can be very difficult to say to your boss, hey, these dates in September and October I need to have off for religious holidays. These are non-negotiable. You cannot reach me. My phone will be turned off on these days.
Right, right, sure. There's no end to different situations of negotiations of arguments where the positions are just, and he says to you, well, you only have 6 vacation days a year, whatever it is, and once those are up, you can't take off. So what do you do? What do you do? So the key is to switch the focus from positions to needs. What does that mean? The position, 8,000, 10,000, that comes from somewhere. It doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a deeper level of your life circumstances and your business considerations if you're the employer. They all come from a lower level of what causes that position that you took. You took the position, I can't pay more than 8, because you have a certain need. Now, what are those needs? Once you change the focus of the discussion to what's the underlying reason that the employer says I need to have 10, here, that opens up the playing field tremendously. When it just comes to numbers, either 8 or it's 10. There's just no way to, you can't change that too much. But if you talk about really what you want is the underlying need. Now, what's the need when you're working and you want to get a salary? And what's the need that you have when you're an employer? So we have some employers here. We have people that have been employees. But I don't want to spend too much time on the employer-employee relationship. It's just an example to show you the principle. We're going to apply it to personal relationships as well. Usually, when you work for a job, you get a number of things. Of course, you get money because you need to pay your rent and you need to, spend, buy food, whatever it is. But at work, you also get a title. You have a place to go every day. You have a certain social standing. If you have a job, which you might lose if you don't have a job, you have a relationship with your spouses. And then what were you saying that sometimes at a job you can get a car from the company, a company car, right? Or you can get a fringe benefit. Maybe you can get more vacation days. Your salary will stay the same, but there's fringe benefits. So what goes into an employment package many times is a lot more than just the position of the number of what your salary is. Now, really, when the employer coming and says, I'm not going to work for less than 10, maybe it's because he feels that he's not appreciated for his work. When you get a higher salary, it shows that you're a valued employee. And really, what's bothering him is that he feels not appreciated. Maybe he feels, his statement, I need 10, I want 10, is not so much because he needs it because of his bills that he has to pay. It's because coming from his feeling of underappreciation, social status.
Not worth working here, getting paid something appropriate.
Right. So there's a lot of factors that go into that position, why he said 10. And the same thing on the other side. Why did the employer say 8? It could be that really, as Yaakov was hinting to, maybe he could pay 9, but why doesn't he want to pay 9? Well, because the other workers are all getting 8. And if he raises one person's salary, then all the others are going to be raised. But really, he does appreciate this worker. So if we open up and understand what the employer's needs are, his needs are not to break the standard. But maybe giving the fringe benefit wouldn't be raising the salary, wouldn't be making the comparisons. Or, sometimes he can't even give him the fringe benefits. But maybe if you understand that really what the employee needs is some appreciation, maybe he'll give him a better title. He'll just change his title. And says, instead of a coordinator, you're going to be a manager. Okay? And that shows that I really appreciate the work you're doing. I can't give you more salary right now. And then maybe you could say, maybe in a year's time, all the finances will change. We'll raise everybody's salaries, but I can't just raise yours without raising everybody else, and I can't raise everybody's. But you can give him something which gives him what he really needed, which was the appreciation. Sometimes what he really needs is the 10, and then, sometimes it really is about positions, and all it is about money, and you can't, sometimes you can't make it work, and he does have to find another job. But many times, if you go, usually we describe it that it's beneath, to the level beneath what the original positions were, to the level of needs. It's like you have, layers in your person. I'll draw it here. So, right.
Is that a person?
That's a person.
Oh.
That's a person.
That's like a turtle. It looks like a turtle, right? A very big turtle. That's south.
Okay.
And it's more like.
Thanks.
No.
He's a happy turtle, though. Anyway, so we start off, and what comes out to our mouths is the position of, I want X or I want Y. But really, where it's coming from is sometimes we say you have, intellectual thoughts. And something that comes from deeper, it comes from the kishkas, comes from your insides, right? That's the level that we're looking for when you want to really solve the problems. If you understand the deeper needs, then sometimes you can meet them in a different way. The needs can lead to one position, it can lead to a different position. It could, you could be very creative if, another example is you have a pie, right? And someone wants his piece of the pie, and he says, well, I need this size of a pie. And the other person says, well, I can only give you, a smaller piece of the pie. I can't give you as much of the pie as you want. You're at an impasse. These two positions are incompatible. What do? What we're trying to do here is saying is that let's increase the size of the pie. If you increase the size of the pie, then your slice that I'm giving you is going to get larger. And how do you do that? By appreciating that first thing you have to do is release from the position. Don't talk on the level of positions. On that level is very little flexibility. When you go down beneath it to understand what you really, you could say need, you could say want, then you're a little bit more flexible when it comes to positions. So let's say, for example, someone says, when I was dating, I was living in Toronto, and I wanted to date, and I wanted to get married, and I had very few dates. Even though Toronto's a big Jewish community, even the religious community, which I was in, there's a lot of girls. But I had very few dates. You know why? My looks, they're just not, And no, but I'm seriously, why would I get very few dates? Because I put a very strong position. I said, I'm not going out with anybody who doesn't want to make aliyah. Okay, that cut down the chances, that cut down the pool of girls that were interested in, and that's fine. That's a position I wanted. But then there's issues, and so sometimes you have to take a stand, and you have to stick by certain positions that are either or. But even that, maybe I was a little too strict. Maybe there was a girl there that, if we worked on it, we'd be able to realize that, maybe she only can't make aliyah or doesn't want to make aliyah temporarily, and so on and so forth. But anyways, that's an example of a position.
Baruch Hashem, you didn't have to get tested.
Baruch Hashem, I didn't have to. I'm very happily married. Baruch Hashem. I made aliyah single, and I found my wife here. Baruch Hashem. That happens too. But many times, when you're dating, you say, I'm only going to date someone who lives in Jerusalem, because it's too far. I can't fathom living outside of Jerusalem. Or I'm only going to date someone who wants to cover their hair after they get married with a wig.
There's a common one that people say is, I don't want to marry someone who's fat.
Oh,
It's a very
right.
common one.
Okay, sure. Yeah, there's looks for sure. I don't want to marry somebody that doesn't have this particular hair color, I've heard. Yes, people get in all sorts of positions. And you don't really know what you want. It's very hard to define what you're looking for in a spouse or in a relationship. And so sometimes you get stuck to positions, right? I'm only going to marry somebody what's the most common? Age. Okay, I'm only going to marry somebody up to the age of 25, up to the age of 30. You're 25 or 30 yourself. So you say, oh, okay, my son married a woman who's 4 years older than him. Luckily, he didn't make any positions because they're very happily married, and she's a great girl, and she's the right one for him. As a matter of fact, they say it's actually smart because women live longer than men at the tail end of stuff. But I don't know. And they say women mature faster than men. That's why usually it's the opposite. Usually younger women and the man's a little bit older, just because we guys take a while till we grow up. But in any case, I'm very against positions of any kind. I won't go out with anybody unless she's, or divorced, or has a child, or a gioret. You'll hear that. I won't go out with a gioret. I won't go out with a ger. I won't go out with a bal tshuva. I won't go out with someone. Right? People take a lot of positions. And we can't discount it offhand. What we have to try to understand is what's the need beneath that. Why are they saying that? Right? Somebody says, I don't want to go out with a ger. Well, maybe there's a good reason for that. It says, because I myself am a ger, and I don't have a family structure here supporting me in Israel, and I very much love to have a family where I can go to on holidays and celebrate with the kids. We'll have cousins, and and I know in my family I'm not going to have that. So I want to marry somebody who's not a gioret, and can understand that need. The position is very, very set in stone, and it cause problems, but we understand the need. Well, then maybe you can solve it. Maybe the woman's a gioret, but yet she has family that is or friends that are like family for her. And maybe she knows a lot of friends in Israel, and she's very social, and she'll have a lot of social contacts, even though she doesn't have blood relatives here, and she herself is a gioret. Notice, you're really shooting yourself in your foot if you're only going to be talking about these positions, these set in stone statements. And the best way to overcome this is to really think about and try to define for yourself what it is you're looking for, what you need, and not just say, well, I'm not going to marry anybody over 30. Why? Why are you saying that? Well, because I want to have a lot of children. And, there's a biological clock which is ticking. And there's, only so many children you can have after the age of 30. And so that's why I say, no, I'm not going to date anybody over the age of 30. Well, that's a legitimate concern. It's a legitimate need. But maybe we can address that need in a different way. Maybe somebody who's 30, can have children quicker. Okay, not quicker than 9 months, but as far as I know, we haven't figured that one out yet. But the fact that, if she really wants to be dedicated to raising a family, you could have a baby a year. There's some families where they have a baby every single year, and it doesn't give you much break in between, and it's very hard on the woman's body, usually, primarily. But if there's a woman who's really dedicated and wants to have a large family, and she is older, and she wants to dedicate herself to child rearing and bearing, it can be done. And nowadays, with modern medicine, you can have children safely with all sorts of genetic testing, a yes or no. I have, yesterday I spoke with a gioret who's getting married, Baruch Hashem, from Sweden, and she finally found somebody. She's 39 years old. She's planning to have lots of children. 39, yeah. I have a friend who had a child over the age of 50.
The world record for a woman is 72.
Yeah. So modern medicine has really enabled childbearing at later ages, and of course, the older you are, the more dangerous it is. Of course, there are risks. There are risks, but we can overcome that nowadays. So setting your positions as is sometimes counterproductive. You speak about the need. I want to have a large family. Maybe you'll find somebody who is a little older who also wants to have a large family, and maybe you will be able to have a large family with them. It doesn't always translate from the need to the specific position that you stuck to. We can talk more about it. We can talk about it in the context of arguments, which we didn't really get to. We talked about who you should date and what your positions are for what you're looking for. And my general approach is to avoid taking these hard and fast positions. But in terms of resolving conflict, we're going to have to leave that for another day. Ukraine and Russia, I don't know, they're going to have to wait. I hope somebody else will help them solve their problems until next week. But next week, hopefully we'll apply these concepts, these principles which I presented today and introduced to you. We'll apply them also to arguments that are more prosaic. And it's not about necessarily just setting up a date and who you're going to go out with, but actually when you're fighting about, why are you leaving your socks in the living room? Or a fight about which school you want to send your kids to. It's also, I want this school, I want that school. Those are two positions. How can you reach any compromise? If you go to the level, just briefly, if you go to the level of needs, why do you want that school? What are you getting at that school? And why do you think you're going to get at that school? Maybe you'll find there's a way to either choose one of those schools and then, fill in what's missing, what you expected to get at the other school, but with, in other methods. Or you'll find a third school, which actually has both of those issues that you're trying to look for. So it applies in so many areas. The key is to go deeper. From the level of positions, ask why. Why? What's the need that you're trying to fulfill by stating such a position? And then you're going to find lots more flexibility once you understand deeper what the need was. We'll have to stop here and continue another time.